Hello, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my reaction channel. My name is Teddy90, and today we're going to be reacting to History of Major Epidemics and Pandemics by Geohistory. I attempted to do this video yesterday, but something went wrong with it. It wouldn't upload, so I watched the video back myself, and it just wouldn't load for me. So something went wrong with the video, I have no idea what, and it frustrated me to no end yesterday trying to, salvage it, because it was like a 30-minute video, because I have no filter. Yeah, something went wrong with it, whatever. So I'm back doing it again today, because this is an interesting video to do a topic on, because obviously the pandemic we're currently going through, or if you're several months in advance, we're currently in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. It is April 19th, if you're curious. So we're in the midst of the pandemic, so I figured, different pandemic videos are interesting. I got a comment before that somebody wanted me to do a video on the dancing plague. I will do a video on that. I just need to research it a bit myself, and I'll get back to you on that. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying, I'm going to preface this by saying this is going to be something I'm going to be doing in the beginning of all my videos now. I'm not going to apologize for knowing a lot about the topic. This video is a bit unique because I've already watched it through before, so I already know the beats. So I'm going to be talking about this because I know what happens in the video, and that's not usually my shtick. But this is something that I want to get out in the beginning of all my videos now. I'm not going to apologize for knowing a lot of material about history, about psychology, about sociology, things like that. I'm just not. So if I happen to talk a lot about the subject before the video gets to it, so be it. I guess I know just as much as the video did in that particular topic. That's just the thing that you're going to have to deal with me. Also, if you don't like half-an-hour long ramble fests, I'd recommend leaving now, because I talk for lengths of time about the topic because I like getting in depth, I like learning, and I like letting you learn. That is how I do my video. So that's that. Go subscribe to Geohistory. They're a great channel, amazing channel. Love their content. So great, so great. They put infinitely more effort into their videos than I ever possibly could or would, because I'm lazy. But, props to them. Now, let's jump into this. I don't remember how I started yesterday's video, so we're just going to let this play. I think I made predictions about what he was going to talk about, but since I already know what's going to happen in this video, that's kind of silly. So let's just let it run, and I'll see where my mind brings me as we go in.
Around the year 9000 BC, man gradually evolves from a hunter-gatherer lifestyle to a relatively more sedentary one. In Mesopotamia initially, man begins to develop agriculture and livestock.
Both true and not true. Mesopotamia was the air quotes original start, but a lot of agriculture happened pretty much, well, not at the same time, but in a relative time scale, the same time throughout a lot of different places in the world. The Nile is a good example. The Indus River over here in India, the Yangtze and the Yellow River in China, the two of the major rivers in China. And I believe the Mississippi had farming as well. I don't know if it was during the same time, but I know they developed it around this time, but they ended up losing it. And then the Andes also developed agriculture in South America, in Peru and Chile and Colombia. The Andes, they did potatoes and things like that. So yes and no when it comes to Mesopotamia being the first to develop it, because really it's one of those things where it popped up amorphously in a lot of places around the globe around the same time scale.
This new proximity between animals and man facilitates the transmission of diseases to the latter. Food production increases, communities, villages, and cities grow, trade routes appear, and the first wars take place. All this contributes to the spread of new contagious diseases.
Now, this is going to be completely off topic, but I know a lot of people who have asked this question. I don't remember when I asked this question. I don't know if this is something that's in your mind, but that is the main reason why the New World didn't give us, or the Old World plagues. We gave the New World plagues, which wiped out a vast amount of their population. I think it was upwards of 90. But that is the reason why the New World didn't give us plagues, except for, I think, was it syphilis that they gave us? It was some STI that they gave us. So they did give us something. But they didn't, it was called Montezuma's Revenge or something, right? The STI or whatever. That doesn't matter. But that's the reason they didn't give us like an actual virulent plague. You would think discovering a new place, it would end up giving you a new plague, right? But the reason that they didn't is because of, as he said back here,
The transmission of this new proximity between animals and man.
Animals and man. Yeah. The reason why the New World didn't have any plagues to offer us, as weird as that sounds, is because they didn't have many domesticated animals. I think they had llamas and those little rat things in South America, and I think that was pretty much it when it comes to true domestication. There wasn't domesticated animals in the New World. So because of that, their civilizations didn't grow as quickly or as fast. They ended up growing, don't get me wrong, they ended up growing, but they didn't grow as fast because they didn't have like horses to plow the fields, things like that, and pigs and other things like that. And because they didn't have those animals in close proximity, they didn't develop a lot of the same diseases that we did. So, he will later go on to talk about the triangle trade and the diseases that ravaged the New World. But this is the main reason why the New World didn't give us plagues. I probably should have put this back there, but whatever, I'm doing it now. That's the main reason they didn't give us plagues, and that's also the main reason why they got wiped out 90%. Is because they didn't have this close proximity to the animals. The New World natives got screwed by geography. The people who migrated there got completely screwed by the fact that the New World was entirely lacking in animals. They just got screwed. There was no way for them to win. There was no way for them to fight off invaders. They lost because of that one fact. If you remove that, if they would have had these animals, they would have been fine. Some of them would have been conquered, but they would have been fine. Because of this, they lost, and it's a horrific twist of fate.
Facilitate the transmission.
Anyway, that was a tangent, but I asked that question many times myself before when I was younger, and I researched it quite thoroughly. And by researched it quite thoroughly, I mean I've read like Guns, Germs, and Steel and other books similar. Guns, Germs, and Steel is very controversial, so read it at your own risk. But I've read books similar. But yeah, I've known people who've asked that question, and I've been someone who asked that question, so just throwing it in
Of
there now.
diseases to the latter. Food production increases, communities, villages, and cities grow, trade routes appear, and the first wars take place. All this contributes to the spread of new contagious diseases. Although there aren't enough historical traces or documentation, the first epidemics probably take place at this time, perhaps even the first pandemics, that is, the spread of an epidemic among different people over large geographical areas. Some religious texts and Egyptian papyri recount the first outbreaks. The development of writing allows a Greek historian to document a pandemic around 430 BC. Known as the Plague of Athens, it is a disease that remains unidentified to this day. According to the story, and thus the Greek point of view, the illness emerges in Ethiopia, spreads in Egypt, Libya, and then throughout the Mediterranean basin. Athens is at war with Sparta and its allies. The city hosts many refugees and is under siege. Too densely populated and in poor hygienic conditions, the plague of Athens worsens and kills 25 to 30% of the population, which facilitates Spartan victory. Around the year 165, when the Mediterranean basin is dominated by the Roman Empire, the Antonine Plague appears, which is probably a smallpox pandemic. It starts in Mesopotamia and spreads rapidly westward, following military travel patterns. The disease kills 5 million people out of the then global population of 200 to 250 million people.
A lot of people. Now, this is going to be slightly off topic, but he mentioned that the disease came from Ethiopia before, right? That Athenian plague. Fun fact about Ethiopia, for those who don't happen to know, Ethiopia is the birthplace of humanity. Like, southern Ethiopia is the birthplace of humanity, and it's quite interesting. That's just a little fun fact.
The Roman Empire is hit hard.
So it's funny to know that a massive plague came from the birthplace of humanity.
Other epidemics further weaken it over the following centuries, probably influencing the fall of the Western Roman Empire. In 541 begins the first known pandemic of bubonic plague, linked to a bacteria infecting small mammals, mainly rats and their fleas. In some cases, the rat fleas bite humans and transmit bacteria to them. Once the infection reaches the lungs, it becomes highly contagious between humans. According to recent studies, the plague of Justinian started in Central Asia and spread via land and sea trade routes to the Byzantine Empire. The capital Constantinople is badly affected. As it lies on a commercial crossroad, the disease spreads throughout the Mediterranean basin. Byzantine military troops engaged in the west are contaminated, which halts the expansion of the empire. In
Yeah, he says halts the expansion of the empire. Under Justinian, the Roman Empire, because this is what this is, Byzantium, or the Eastern Romans, commonly referred to as Byzantium, or Byzantine, it was in the process of reconquering Europe. It was in the process of reconquering Europe for Rome. If without this plague, Justinian would have succeeded, or one of his successors would have succeeded, because they would have had the economic backbone necessary to push through and have the taxes and other things like that to fund the war machine, because wars are ridiculously expensive, ruinously expensive. They would have had the money and manpower to push through and conquer all of Europe back for the Roman Empire, which would have changed history ridiculously. So I made the same point in the last time I tried this video, but there's this common theme throughout humanity where where we tend to think we're the purveyors of our own destiny, that we're in control of everything, but really we're at the whims of the dice as much as anyone else, right? As much as animals, or as much as whatever. We're at the whims of fate, and we don't really control the helm. And things like this can completely and utterly change the course of history. Natural disasters and diseases can completely and utterly change the course of history. If you want a good example of that, one of the best examples I've heard is the Mongols invading Japan twice, and both times getting forced away by a natural disaster. The Japanese, if the Mongols would have lasted and not had their boats blown apart, and got their reinforcements completely unable to even get there, the Mongols would have conquered Japan. It would have happened. The Mongols would have conquered Japan, because the Mongol Empire was insanely powerful, and no one could stand up to the Mongols. The Japanese were great fighters, great individual fighters, but the Mongols didn't give a shit, and they would have burned everything to the ground, because that's what the Mongols do. It's just a fact. If the first time when the Mongols were sailing over, I think it was a typhoon, destroyed their entire neighborhood. The second time, I think 10, 15 years later, they tried it again, actually landed troops that time. The Japanese were holding their own, but more reinforcements would have come back, and they would have lost. Then that typhoon wiped out the remnants of the navy, the second typhoon, and the stranded people ended up dying, because obviously getting invaded, blah blah blah. But that would have changed history ridiculously if the Mongols would have conquered Japan, because then there wouldn't have been the Japanese Empire growing. That wouldn't have led. The Tokugawa wouldn't have ended up isolating itself, and before that, there wouldn't have been that failed invasion of Korea, which then forced them to go inwards, which then wouldn't have led to the Tokugawa, which then wouldn't have led them to getting forced open by the Americans, which then wouldn't have led them to end up conquering most of East Asia, committing horrific acts. History would have been completely changed just by Mother Nature not being an asshole. Or, honestly, frankly speaking, it was kind of a good thing that the typhoons killed the Mongols, because the Mongols were horrific. But still, just something simple like that can completely change everything. Same with disease. Without this disease, Justinian, or one of his successors, because Justinian was a paranoid motherfucker by the time this was happening. He was paranoid of everyone. Someone else would have ended up finishing the conquering of the rest of the Roman Empire, and the West would have had a single polity, just like China is now. It would have been a parity of West and East. So China has a tendency to fall apart, and then go back together, then fall apart, then go back together. Rome would have had the same thing, because it was constantly falling apart, then going back together, then falling apart, then going back together, then falling apart and going back together, and then it just didn't go back together again that last time. With this, it probably would have continued in that cycle. So, one small deviation, if you remove this plague, history is radically changed. And he'll go on to talk about Islam and the rise of Islam and everything else like that. And that's another massive change. And without this plague, Islam would have died in its cradle. It would have been stuck in the Middle East. It maybe would have conquered Egypt, but the Romans would have conquered it right back. But small little things like this can ridiculously change.
In Rome, Pope Pelagius II succumbs to the disease. In Mesopotamia, the Byzantine and Sasanian empires, already severely affected by the pandemic, lose steam in war. This benefits the Arabs, who start their Muslim conquests. The Sasanian Empire collapses, while the Byzantine Empire is greatly reduced. The plague of Justinian claims between 30 and 100 million victims over 2 centuries. Leprosy is a bacterial disease mentioned in texts dating back to antiquity. Probably native to East Africa, according to recent studies, it spreads through Egypt to Asia and Europe following trade routes. As Europe's population gets denser, it is likely that crusades to Jerusalem accelerated the spread of leprosy on the continent. Bad hygiene, lack of sewers, and poorly ventilated homes fosters transmission of this disease, which is otherwise not very contagious. The poor are the worst affected. Exclusion measures are taken against the sick. Lepers are considered already dead by the Catholic religion. They are isolated in leper colonies, which can be anything from a simple hut on the edge of a village or a leprosaria, or sickroom facilities in cities. Lepers end their lives in such confinements, completely isolated from the outside world.
Now, that sounds horrific from an outside point of view, right? Isolating them because they happen to have a disease. Horrific. But if you look at it from their point of view, they don't know what bacteria are. They don't know different sanitation techniques. They don't know that with sufficiently strong alcohol you can kill most bacteria. They don't know that. They don't have penicillin. They don't have anything like that. So, and this disease rots your flesh, right? That's what leprosy is. It's a flesh-eating bacteria. And it spreads by contact. So, to them, isolating them is probably the best thing they can do for society as a whole. Because, one, it's a terrifying disease. Two, they don't know how it's spread. And three, it's fucking terrifying. So, the idea of getting leprosy is utterly terrifying to most people. I'll show you the leprosy if you want me to show you leprosy. This might get me banned off of YouTube, but leprosy. Don't judge my spelling. Can someone tell me why Yahoo is always here and Google? Whatever. I hate Yahoo. Yeah, leprosy. Yeah, it like tears off your fingers. Like it's not great. It's not great. Yeah, it eats you. So to them, isolating people like this, as they did, seemed the most logical. And I don't blame them for having to do it. As terrible as it is. Black Death. The big one. The big boy. The big BD. That could be construed weirdly. There was a video I did the other day on this. I reacted to it and then added my own thing. But yeah, everyone knows the Black Death. The only thing I'm going to add to the Black Death for this, I'll let him talk. The only thing I'm going to add for the Black Death is, you know those like long masks? Plague masks? This is a fun little fact. I think I talked about this in the Black Death video, but if you didn't catch it, here we go. Those masks, the reason that they look so weird, they're so beak-like, is because they thought back during that time that it was airborne, and that the best way to prevent, they thought it was, well, not airborne, that's giving them a bit too much credit. They thought it was miasma in the air. They thought it was bad air. So what they did with this is pack it full of like different scents, like sulfur, not maybe not, probably not sulfur, but like incense and other things like that, pepper, anything sufficiently strong enough to block out bad air, because that's what they thought. Oh, excuse me. Because that's what they thought caused it. So from their point of view, they thought it was, even though they didn't know the difference between viral and bacterial, and the Black Death is bacterial, they treated it like they would a viral pandemic by putting a mask over themselves and trying to keep away from the bad air quotes. So that's a little fun fact. They were treating the Black Death as if it was a viral pandemic. It's a shame someone couldn't have gone back and told them that sufficient sanitation and things like that is one of the best ways you can deal with bacterial plagues. Not the Black Death, obviously. You need antibiotics, but yeah. Fun little facts about history. Fun little facts.
The Black Death is considered the second pandemic of bubonic plague. It originates in the steppes of Central Asia and spreads across the continent. On the shores of the Black Sea, warriors of the Golden Horde besiege the Genoese city of Kaffa.
The Golden Horde is the Mongols, just by the way. One of the many Mongol branch offs.
Weakened by the plague, they catapult their dead into the city to spread the disease. Rats also likely further contaminate the city.
That probably happened, but this disease also would have spread just naturally because the Mongol Empire had protected trade routes throughout them. So this disease would have spread anyway without this. This just made it go faster. So, like, without this, it probably would have hit Europe 20, 30 years later, but it still would have hit.
After the siege fails, Genoese sailors resume trade across Europe, spreading the plague in port cities. The disease then spreads inland. Only regions of Poland, Bohemia, and Hungary are spared. The plague
And apparently, Belgium, according to the last video. I don't know how true that is.
manifests strongly in densely populated areas and disproportionately affects the poor, the malnourished, and those living in unsanitary conditions. Doctors are overwhelmed. In a few years, the disease kills 200 million people worldwide, a little less than half the European population. The continent would take 2 centuries to recover its pre-pandemic demography. The Black Death is endemic, that is, it would locally resurface several times over the following centuries. Preventive measures are taken, especially in Venice, where ships have to wait 40 days before being able to enter the port. These are the first quarantines, quaranta being the Italian word for the number 40.
That is a fun little note, something I had no idea that quarantine came from Italian for 40. I didn't know that. That's a fun little fact that I now have in my brain. So remember that. It's fun. It's a nice little trivia thing. If you're weird like me and like knowing this weird trivia stuff.
In Europe, the
I mean, if you're watching me, I guess you do.
construction of new, more efficient vessels allows the Spanish and Portuguese to broaden exploration. With Christopher Columbus landing in America and Vasco da Gama opening a sea route to India through the African coasts, exchanges rapidly increase between people previously isolated from each other and with different immunity systems. People from the Old World import along with them a dozen diseases still unknown in the New World. Smallpox proves particularly devastating for Native Americans. Epidemics decimate entire populations.
Decimate's the wrong word.
Even
Decimate means 1 in 10.
before the arrival
I say that in every video someone says decimate. It's the only word I like correcting people on.
of European settlers. Conversely, entire populations even before the arrival of European settlers. Conversely, a form of virulent syphilis, a sexually transmitted infection, is imported from America to Europe. Furthermore, tropical diseases such as yellow fever and malaria caused by parasites spread around the world via carrier mosquitoes that accompany ships. Meanwhile, medicine continues to evolve in the face of multiple disease outbreaks. In 1768, an English apothecary named John Fuster
Okay, yeah. He didn't go into how bad the New World was affected, but I believe it was... Oh, that's don't judge how many tabs I have. New World Plague. Where is it? How do they stop the plague? How many native? Yeah, where is it? Syphilis, blah blah blah. Impact on population numbers. Here we go. Many natives experience averaging 25 to 50, and I think some places were hit upwards to 90, if my memory is correct. Smallpox hit. Native to the Americas. Mexican population reduced to 3 million. Yeah, here it is. Before his arrival, the Mexican population was estimated to be about 25 to 30 million. 50 years later, the Mexican population was reduced to 3 million, mainly by infectious disease. Yeah, that's ridiculously high. That's... I'm not even going to do the math, but that I think that's upwards to like 80 to 90%, yeah. And so it did utterly destroy like countries and things like that. Like the Aztecs probably would have still been conquered because no one liked the Aztecs, but they would have forced the Spanish out at some point. It was just look at how much their empire, like the population collapsed. They had no chance. The New World had no chance because of disease. It wasn't because of technology. It wasn't because the white man is somehow superior. It wasn't because the colonial people were bad to the natives, and they were. It wasn't any of that. It was disease. That is the reason the native populations were unable to stop the colonizers. That is 100% the reason. Everything else is such a minute thing in comparison to how many people fucking died because of the fact that they didn't have enough domesticated animals in the New World, and because of that, they just didn't have the immunities to the diseases. It's a horrific twist of fate. It's so bad that just because their ancestors migrated there and didn't happen to bring any of the animals with them, or they happened to die out, it's fucking startling to think about. Like, I've heard people, a lot of racist people be like, I live in a super rural area, being like, oh, the natives are weak, they deserve to get conquered or whatever. No, they've been able to fight back, but the disease. And I've heard natives, Native Americans. I live in a place with different reservations, things around. Reservations are horrific, by the way. Look into them if you want to. Talk about how, it was the white man's barbarity or whatever. Nope, it was disease. It was just disease. Straight up, it was just disease. It was disease. Anyway, sorry, that's something that sticks heavily in my mind. Just how horrific that is.
Finds that
they didn't have a chance. I'm gonna stop going on about it.
People infected with cowpox, a disease dangerous to bovines but not humans, are protected from the smallpox virus. A few years later, the cowpox vaccine is detected with cowpox carrier mosquitoes that accompany ships.
Malaria, yeah.
Meanwhile,
malaria is pretty bad in Brazil and the Caribbean and things like that now, because it's tropical and things like that. It became a hellish place for most people to exist.
Evolve in the face of multiple disease outbreaks. In 1768, an English apothecary named John Fuster finds that people infected with cowpox, a disease dangerous to bovines but not humans, are protected from the smallpox virus. A few years later, the cowpox vaccine is injected into populations to counter smallpox, resulting in the first form of vaccine. The treatment would evolve, and the smallpox disease would be eradicated over 2 centuries.
One of humanity's greatest achievements, wiping smallpox from the map. And now fucking anti-vaxxers are bringing it back, the damn motherfuckers.
Cholera is a bacterial infection that only affects the human species through the ingestion of contaminated food or water. The disease
If you're wondering what this is a back scratcher knife. It's completely dull. See? Completely dull. It's back scratcher knife.
Disease causes severe diarrhea, resulting in life-threatening dehydration. Without treatment, disease through the cholera is a bacterial infection that only affects the human species through the ingestion of contaminated food or water. The disease causes severe diarrhea, resulting in life-threatening dehydration.
He doesn't say how it's infected. Cholera is the one that it's consumption, right? It's the one where you get it if it's infected with human feces, right? I think that's how it comes.
Without treatment, half of those infected die within a few hours or days. The disease spreads more rapidly in densely populated areas with poor hygienic conditions. The first cholera pandemic begins in 1817 in the vicinity of Bengal and spreads in Asia, Africa, and to the gates of Europe. 5 other cholera pandemics would break out over the following century and affect the entire world. In 1855, in the west of Yunnan, China, begins the third and last pandemic of bubonic plague. It spreads slowly to the port city of Hong Kong, from where, in a few years, it spreads from ships and ports around the whole world. But this time, French biologists and doctors discover the bacteria responsible for the disease and how rat fleas propagate it. A serum is created and rat extermination measures are taken on vessels, which limits numbers mainly in developed countries. British India is still badly affected with around 10 million deaths, while China has 2 million victims.
India, if you're wondering why the disparity there is so great, India during this time was currently colonized by the British. Colonized is an interesting term for what was happening in India. And they were in squalid conditions because the British were horrific. India is probably up there in one of the greatest war crimes the British Empire ever committed, just by how terribly, well, war crime, the greatest crimes against humanity that the British Empire ever did. Up there with the Irish famine. I'm sure there's others that I'm missing, but it's up there. Look into India. It's horrific.
Influenza is an infectious disease that is difficult to contain because it is caused by 4 different strains of viruses that can quickly mutate and generate new epidemics. The first major flu pandemic, called the Russian flu, raged in 1889 and 1890 from the Eurasian steppes to the European and American continents. But it's the second major influenza outbreak, known as the Spanish flu, which proves to be the most devastating flu pandemic. Its origins still unknown. It appears during World War I. In the United States, the virus mutates and becomes virulent. Transported by soldiers to Europe, the disease spreads through the globe as soon as World War I ends. A third of the world's population is infected, and about 50 million people die from it. There would be 2 further flu pandemics, causing approximately 1 million deaths each.
The reason why it's called the Spanish flu is because the Spanish were the first to actually report on it. The Spanish were the first to actually report on the flu, so everyone blamed them. Even though it wasn't their fault and it didn't come from them, but everyone blamed them. Feel bad for the Spanish in that particular instance. They tried to warn the world and all they did was get saddled with the plague.
So-called Asian flu in 1957 and the Hong Kong pandemic in 1968.
HIV/AIDS.
Originally from Central Africa, the AIDS virus spreads from chimpanzees to man due to hunting some 60 years earlier. The virus slowly reaches Leopoldville in the Belgian Congo.
Ooh, yeah. Look up the Congo if you want, the Belgian Congo if you want some nightmare fuel. Look up Belgian Congo hands if you want worse nightmare fuel. I'm not gonna put that on YouTube. Yeah, look Leopold was a vile piece of shit. And I hope he burns in hell eternally. I'm not even Christian, and he fucking deserves it.
from where it spreads across river routes and railways all around
Yeah, so look into that if you want nightmare fuel.
the country and then across the continent. In 1964, the return of contaminated Haitian workers takes the disease to North America, especially in the United States from 1970. In 1983 in Paris, the
It spread rapidly among the gay community in the United States. During the time, no one knew that diseases could be spread through. Well, it was a mixture of gays were persecuted and had to like hide their sexual activity, and two, they didn't know that AIDS could get spread through unprotected sex, and there's a lot of that going on in the gay community, and it spread rapidly, and it became known as like a gay disease. It's not, but
the past
that's why homosexual males, female or whatever, gays, can't give blood in pretty much all of North America, because it's still thought of as gay sex is something that you can get diseases from, and if you have gay sex, you're not allowed to give blood because you might have diseases. Yeah, I tried to give blood before, and I got dinged by that particular weird thing, and I'm in Canada, so.
Pasteur Institute identifies the HIV virus that causes AIDS, the disease that weakens the immune system and therefore facilitates the development of other infections. AIDS then infects people worldwide to qualify as a pandemic in 2005. Prevention, treatment, and contraceptives help curb the disease, but still results in about 30 million victims in 30 years. Today, some 40 million people live with HIV. At the end of 2019, the SARS-CoV-2 virus is probably transmitted from animals to humans and is first observed in Wuhan, China. With high levels of globalization, the new disease COVID-19 spreads rapidly around the world. On March 11,
CCP virus, if you want to be a bit controversial.
2020, the World Health Organization declares it a pandemic. Furthermore, despite major advances
World Health Organization, ridiculously corrupt. Look into it.
in medicine, other
horrifically corrupt.
diseases still claim
Staggeringly corrupt.
many victims. Plague is still rampant and reappears regularly. The last epidemic in 2017 hitting Madagascar and Seychelles. A seventh cholera pandemic has been underway since 1961 and still causes 100,000 global victims each year, according to the WHO. There are under 3 million leprosy patients worldwide, while seasonal flu kills about 500,000 people annually.
True.
Malaria claims as many victims each year, the vast majority being young children in sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah.
Poor and remote populations remain the main victims of these epidemics and pandemics.
That was a great video. Amazing. I loved the in-depthness he went into for some of those earlier plagues that I didn't know about, like the Athenian plague. I didn't know about things like that, because I'm not a virologist. Is that what they're called? They're called something anyway. People who study viruses. I'm a sociology philosophy major. I used to be psychology, but I switched. But yeah, if you liked that particular video, go like and go subscribe to Geohistory. He deserves it. They deserve it. They deserve all the love, happiness, everything else like that. I don't know if they have a Patreon, but if they do, go join it. So go look. They do have a Patreon. Go join it. Geohistory. Go join it. They deserve all the love and happiness and everything else like that. If you liked my rambly, holy fuck, this is a 40-minute video. Yeah, all right. If you liked my rambliness and you liked me rambling for 40 minutes on a 12-minute video, and you made it this far, I guess give me a like, give me a subscribe, give me everything else like that. Talk about what you liked, what you didn't like down at the bottom. Damn, I can talk for a long time. Yeah, whatever, that's fine. Yeah, go join my Twitch, go join my Discord, go do everything else like that. I stream occasionally. I pretty much never post on Discord. But yeah, that's about it. And I technically have a Patreon if you care. I don't care, so you shouldn't care. Yeah. Love, butts, and happiness and everything else like that. I'll see you in the next one. If you have any things you want me to talk about or make videos on or whatever the hell, yeah, just leave it in the comments and I'll see what I can do. About the dancing plague, if you're watching this, and we'll do a video on the dance plague. Dance, revolution, dance. Yeah, I'll do a video on the dancing plague. Yeah. Bye now.